Hey everybody, this is Kristen from A Voice and a View, here to do another video. And I hope you like my shirt. Smarty cat. Kind of looks like me today. Used to love Smarties as a kid. Still love them. But I guess I don't really look for them as much anymore, but a lot of places don't carry them. But this place, where I'm at, they have a lot of the old candy that a lot of places don't sell, which is amazing. So I'm loving it. But today is story time, and I'm going to mention a few different situations. I'm hoping this doesn't go too long, but depending on how much detail I put into some of my other experiences here. But so I'm going to talk about two different train situations and one car accident. So the first train situation was when I was in high school, and I used to love to jump these tracks. The train tracks used to be, I don't know, about half a mile from where I lived, and they were on like a little hill, and I used to love to jump them. And I never paid attention to trains going by, because usually you'd hear it, But I used to love to jump these tracks, and I'd always have my music up loud, singing along, not paying attention. And I jumped these tracks the one time, and I looked in my rearview mirror because I saw something go by, and I had just missed a train. I don't know how close it was, but it was close, because as soon as I crossed the tracks, I saw something go by my mirror, and I looked back and it was right there. So Spirit saved me that day. That was a shocker, and I paid attention after that, obviously. But, being stupid, being young, and not paying attention. So that was my first train experience. Second one. I used to live by a military base. And a group of my friends at the time were having a party. And I had to work the next day, so I wasn't planning on drinking. And so I hitched a ride with the girl that I was living with at the time over to their house. And it was a luau, right? They were having those fire dances in the backyard. It was really cool. Some of my Hawaiian and Samoan friends. And we were having a good time, and everybody was drinking and whatever. Well, I wanted to leave to go home, and, everybody was drinking quite a bit. And so I offered to drive. And the guy a good friend of mine at the time, didn't want me driving his vehicle. And I'm like, well, I didn't want somebody drunk driving me. So I was kind of fighting with him on it. And I just decided, okay, what am I going to do? I got to get home. So we were driving, and Bohemian Rhapsody came on. I love that song. And we were all dancing in the car, being loud. It was raining. It was raining really hard. And to get back to my place at the time, we had to cross these train tracks. And I was in the back seat, so I couldn't really see what was going on ahead of me because of the rain and whatnot. So we're driving along, and he's going pretty fast. And the next thing I know, the car is going sideways and, super bumpy. We're kind of like hitting the sides of the car. It's kind of shaking, and I didn't know what was going on, but everybody was freaking out. So the car comes to a stop, and we get out. And instead of going over the train tracks to turn down the road that was past the train tracks, he decided, well, he didn't decide, he just, I don't know if he couldn't see or what was going on, but he ended up sliding down the train tracks. He turned on the train tracks. And we went sideways. And we were probably, I don't know, 2 feet off the ground when the car stopped. So we couldn't get off the tracks. We were stuck. And everybody was freaking out. And it was lit up in the area with street lights. So we were paying attention if there was a train coming or not. And the girl that I used to live with, she started crying and she started freaking out because her husband died in a car accident a few years before that. It was a 4-way stop, and some guy went through the light, or he went through, and anyways. So she was crying and freaking out. It just triggered her, So, we were trying to calm her down. We were paying attention to see if there was a train coming. We didn't know what to do. And a light appeared at the further end. So, of course, again, we're freaking out. And it ended up being a car. And the light was following the train tracks down that road towards us. And my one friend went over there and told him what happened, and that we needed a tow truck. So they took off, and we're waiting for the tow truck. Well, in the meantime, we see a light coming from the opposite direction of the train tracks, and it was a train. The next thing you know, a helicopter came out of nowhere from the base. And it had, the big light on, because it was at night, at this time. Helicopter had a big spotlight and was shining it down on the train and the vehicle on the tracks. So the train stopped, thank God, and the police showed up, and they ended up separating me and the driver. Well, actually, the people that were in the car, friends I used to know, they were in the car, and the driver convinced me to say that I was driving because I was the only one that hadn't been drinking. And obviously I was like, no, I'm not getting myself into this. Well, he ended up convincing me. So when the police separated us, I told him I was driving. So he had talked to me first, and then they went to him and talked to him. They came back to me and they said, no, we know your friend was driving and not you. So if you don't confess to what happened, you're going to lose your license. So then I confessed. I was like, yeah, I wasn't driving. So they arrested him, took him away. And obviously it became very uncomfortable for everybody. And I was crying, and they were upset with me. They were mad at me because I admitted that I was not driving. I was the one that was going to drive sober, and he didn't want me to. He didn't want anybody driving his vehicle. And then this ends up happening. So after that, things just became uncomfortable, and everybody just kind of went their separate ways, or at least I did. But these are the kinds of things that happen. So there was more things that happened with this situation that I'm not going to mention, but this was back in the early 90s. And, you know, I wrote a story about this in college, about my experience, and everybody's like, you're adding that helicopter thing in there. There was no helicopters, you know, or they didn't use helicopters, you know. Yeah. When you're outside a military base, yeah. So anyways, that was my other train experience. But I didn't have any problem from that situation, because I ended up telling the truth. But so here's my third story. My car accident. So I was on my way down from Lake Tahoe, and I had a beautiful red Chevy Beretta at the time. It was a 2-door. I had just gotten it not too long before this. But so I'm on my way down the mountain, and there's an area to the right side of the road where people pull off to put chains on their tires to go down the mountain in the winter. And it was storming. It was snowing, you know. The roads were slushy and it was cold. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and the side of the road was really wide because that's where everybody pulled off to put their tires or their chains on their tires. So I pulled all the way over to the side of the highway. Nowhere near traffic, you know, coming down the mountain. And I had my window down, like halfway down. And I don't remember why, but I had my window down halfway. And I get out of my car, and I'm like, oh, I forgot my gloves. So I went to reach back in my car. I had my gloves on my front seat. So I went to reach back in to get my gloves. And all I heard from behind me was, get out of the way. Somebody screaming, get out of the way. So I turn around, and this big jacked up Blazer with big tires. Or no, it wasn't a Blazer. Sorry, it was a truck. Anyways, it had a big lift on it. Was sliding towards me. Okay. Like fast. And I don't remember exactly what happened on how I ended up this way. Okay, but all I remember is this vehicle sliding towards me and fast. And this vehicle had huge tires and a big lift on it. So it was, you know, it was super high. But somehow I ended up on the top of my car with my legs dangling down. And when that truck slid into me, it was inches away from my legs, from being pinned in between my car and their truck. Now, I don't remember. I don't remember how I got to the top of my car. All I remember is hearing them say, "Get out of the way," screaming it. And I turned around and I saw that big jacked up vehicle. And the next thing I remember is me on the top of my car. I'm sitting on the top of my car with my legs dangling down. And that truck hit me inches away from my legs. And I ended up with not a scratch on me. I know Spirit got me out of a mess again. I don't know how I survived it. I don't know how I ended up on the top of my vehicle. I don't remember much besides what I just mentioned. But unfortunately, I didn't call the police. I didn't get a police report. We took each other's information, our insurance information, but I was so shook up, I didn't get a police report, and I just wanted to get out of there. Well, my door was obviously crushed, and I could open it a little bit, but I couldn't open it all the way. So the guy ended up bungee cording my door shut because I had to drive another 2 or 3 hours home in a snowstorm with my door bungee corded shut and my window partially down. So yeah, I had snow coming in all the way home. I was in shock and disbelief on what had happened and how I survived it, and I was shaken. I just wanted to get out of there. And I got home okay, and I ended up calling my insurance company, gave them the other person's information. They did an investigation. I told them where I pulled off the road because I was way far away from the highway, enough to where there's nobody close to me. And there was other vehicles where I was parked. We were all in a line on the side of the highway, way off the side of the highway. So I wasn't the only vehicle there. But they did a so-called investigation on it and took pictures, which wasn't the area where I was, and said that I wasn't pulled off the road far enough. And so it was my fault. And so my insurance company did not pay for my vehicle. And I didn't have money to fix it. I think I had like a $500 or a $1,000 deductible at the time. I didn't have money. So I had to drive my vehicle for a year with my car door bungee corded shut, and I had to climb through the passenger side seat to get in my car for a year. So I couldn't go through drive-thrus. I couldn't go to the drive-thru in a bank or a fast food place or anything because I couldn't get out my door. I didn't have money to fix it. Somehow that accident ended up being my fault, and it wasn't my fault. And I got blamed for it. Let me tell you, that was not a fun year. Very embarrassing. And I had to deal with it for a year. And it wasn't my fault. I was doing the right thing. And somehow I ended up with all the damage to my vehicle, and after that, the damage that was done, my car just, it didn't last much longer. It caused a domino effect, or a domino of problems. And so yeah, I think it was like a year later I had to get rid of it. But it was a beautiful red Chevy Beretta V6. Go pretty fast, and it was a stick shift. I love stick shifts. Most of my vehicles have been stick shifts. Up until I think the last two. But yeah, most of my life I had stick shifts. Love them. But that was definitely an interesting year. But yeah, I don't know how I got out of that with not a scratch on me, guys. My angels were working, taking care of me. I tell you, they've gotten me out of quite a few messes in my life. You know, I've mentioned before that I've had quite a few near-death experiences. What am I at? 21 minutes. Well, here, I'll mention another one. I've mentioned before that I've almost drowned. And this was when I was in middle school. I'm thinking maybe it was in between elementary and middle school. But anyways, my family, we went to a graduation party. And they had a huge pond with one of those big rafts in the middle of the lake for diving off of. Big platforms. They have the big barrels on two sides and the ladders on the other two sides. And I looked over and I saw a bunch of kids jumping off of it and swimming underneath it. So I was like, oh, cool, you know, I'm going to go do it. So I jump in the water, and this was in the middle of a big pond. It was a big pond. So I get in the water and I swim over there, thinking that the kids were underneath. So I go underneath, I dive underneath, and I come up, and, you know, there's a big air pocket under there. And all of a sudden, everybody's gone. There was nobody in there. And I'm like, what the heck? Where'd everybody go? So then all of a sudden, the raft, or the platform, whatever you want to call it, pushes me like really far under the water. It hit my head and pushed me far under the water, and I didn't have time to take a breath. I didn't know what was happening. And so as I'm under the water with this raft on top of me, I look over and there's a huge woman, a very large woman, standing on the raft and jumping off of it. And then I see I'm thinking there was at least 3 or 4 women that were climbing up the ladder and jumping off of it into the pond. You know, and they were doing the whole what do you call where you jump and you, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. But anyways, they were jumping really hard off of it. And every time they did this, the platform would come down hard and hit me in the head. Okay? And every time they did this and jumped off of it, the platform would come up and there would be an air pocket. So I would come up quick to get a breath. And I didn't always have a lot of air, right? I could see through the cracks of the platform of the women up above me and climbing up on the side. But I didn't always have enough air. And being hit in the head over and over again from the women jumping off of it and hitting me in the head and pushing me further and further in the water, it was very hard to concentrate. And I was freaking out because I couldn't breathe. So when they jumped off of the platform, every time they did this, okay, another woman would climb up the ladder on the other side and get on. So I'm trying to pay attention to when one's jumping off and the other one is climbing up, and trying to stay focused and trying not to freak out, trying to get a breath at the same time. And so, like I said, there was a ladder on each side and there was a barrel on each side. So I could either swim underneath the barrel or underneath the ladder. So every time someone jumped off of it, I would hurry up and dive down underneath. And the first time I did it, I dove under to get under the ladder, and the ladder ended up hitting me in the back and pushing me further down. So I had to go back and get air. And so I'm doing this, I don't know how many times I did it. I'm thinking it was at least 3 or 4 times. At least 3 or 4. The next time I went underneath the barrel. But I had to go back and forth and do this a few times. And I was out of breath. And I remember thinking to myself, am I going to die? And I looked down in the water and it was really deep. You couldn't see below, But I remember seeing the sunlight through the water, but I couldn't see the bottom. And then I looked back up and I could see everybody jumping on, jumping off, jumping on, jumping off, or climbing up and jumping off. It was surreal. But I finally got out, and I remember going underneath, coming up, and I remember crying, trying to get air. And I remember saying, I was underneath. And the person just, I don't know if they were drunk, but they didn't act concerned. They didn't act like they cared. They were just having fun jumping off of the platform. And I just remember swimming to shore and trying to breathe. But I'll never forget this moment. Never forget it. Another situation I ended up in where, it was a close call. Pretty traumatic for, someone as young as I was at the time. And glad I made it out. I'm glad my angels were watching over me. I tell you, how I get myself into these experiences, but I don't think they're a coincidence. So anyways, guys, this is the end of story time today, and until next time, this is Kristen from A Voice and a View. Peace, love, and light. Bye.